Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of the VSAN Mythbuster series. Today, we'll be talking about a myth that VSAN does not scale. We'll be looking to bust that myth today. And my name is Ernesto China. I'm part of the VSAN Global Product Marketing team. And with me is Rakesh, who's a Global Product Manager for VSAN. Welcome, Rakesh.
Thank you, Ernie.
Yeah. So in tackling this particular myth, I know there's actually quite a few variants of this myth out there today. So maybe we should start off by making sure the audience knows what we're talking about. So can you give us a short description, Rakesh, of this myth and what they're talking about when they talk about VSAN not scaling?
Yes. So there are basically two versions of this myth that I've heard. One version is that from a performance standpoint, VSAN does not scale in terms of IOPs and latency as you scale more number of hosts in a cluster. The second one is that customers are forced to add more compute when they want to scale storage and vice versa, thereby incurring unnecessary cost.
Got it. Well, let's start off. Let's kind of take these one at a time. So let's start off with the idea that VSAN does not scale linearly. Can you give us your response to that myth?
Yes. So first off, VSAN, as you know, was designed on the basic premise of simplicity for HCI customers. So it employs a unique distributed object architecture whereby we ensure that objects are distributed equally across all the hosts in a cluster through an intelligent placement engine. And what the placement engine does is that it ensures that at any given point in time that all objects are equally distributed across the cluster. It monitors this on an ongoing basis and keeps rebalancing this if as and when needed. Thereby, when you add more hosts to a cluster, we ensure that all the objects are equally distributed and this does not impact the scale in any manner.
Great. So there's the other one that you mentioned, which is really, this first one was on performance. The second one really has more of a cost implication. Yeah. But this one specifically talks about the fact that you cannot increase capacity without increasing compute, or vice versa. So it basically says those are tied together, which can get costly. Right. Can you address that one?
Yeah, let's take a simple example, right? If you take a standard rack server with 8 to 12 drive slots and say use a 4 terabyte capacity drive, that gives you like 40 terabytes per host, and across 4 hosts, that gives you about 160 terabytes. Add dedupe and other efficiencies on top of that, that's 250 terabytes in a 4-node cluster. Most of our customers don't even need a third of that capacity. So what we see our customers doing is they do not populate all their drive slots on day zero. They populate as much as they want. And then as their capacity demands increase, they just keep adding more drives to those drive slots without having to add compute. The other thing to keep in mind is VSAN also scales performance in terms of disk groups. So when you add more disks and create more disk groups, you get more performance without even adding a new host or a new compute.
Perfect. Well, I did want to bring up one example that seems to come up a lot of times when I'm talking to partners that they use to kind of perpetuate this myth. And that's the example that, hey, customers are actually not scaling into clusters, right, into one big cluster. In many cases, they're breaking it up into smaller clusters. That must be because of the fact that VSAN does not scale. How would you answer that?
Okay, that is completely for a different reason. First off, let me say, and I'm going to quote an example shortly. We do have customers who have very large customer deployments. So we have customers with 32 nodes, 48 nodes, and I'll be giving you an example shortly. But that aside, one of the reasons why customers break clusters down into 8 nodes or 16 nodes is for manageability reasons. They find it easier to manage smaller clusters for a variety of reasons. Some customers might want to add different types of workloads onto smaller clusters as opposed to running all types of workloads on a single cluster. So it's really a customer choice, and it's actually driven by manageability reasons as opposed to scale reasons. Because as I told you, we also have customers who have 32 and 48 node clusters.
Right. So before we go into maybe some examples of that, let's talk a little bit about the fact that obviously VSAN is the software portion, there's the hardware portion of this. Is there anything that we do with with our hardware partners to ensure that they can get this scaling that we're talking about on the hardware side, not just the software side?
Yeah, so the beauty of HCI, the way we've built it, we've built software-defined storage which can run on standard commodity x86 servers. Now, as we know, all hardware is not equal. And we have partnerships with a large number of OEMs that provide their own hardware platforms, which we certify as ready nodes as part of our Ready Labs program, certification program. Now, one of the key aspects of the Ready Lab certification program is to ensure that every new hardware that is certified for vSAN goes through a full gamut of tests to ensure that the performance scales linearly as you add more nodes to the cluster. So if for any reason, owing to a specific hardware architecture, if the hardware is not able to scale linearly, then that will not pass the vSAN certification and it will not get listed as a vSAN ready node. So we take a lot of care to ensure that the hardware is fully certified for scalability aspects as well.
Perfect. So we cover the whole solution. So let's do something here, because I know out there our partners sometimes have heard everything you said. You've done a great job of explaining and kind of countering all of those different kind of passes at this myth. Let's talk about a real life example. Can you give me an example where we've done this for those folks that are still holding on to some concern that we may not scale?
So what's better than a real world example, right? So everyone's heard of Lufthansa, which is one of the largest airlines in the world. And I'm very pleased to let you know that Lufthansa actually runs its mission critical billing and reservation apps on top of vSAN. To give an indication of how mission critical this is, if the system is down even for an hour, Lufthansa incurs a loss of millions of dollars. So back in March of 2014, when vSAN was just launching, the first version of vSAN 5.5 was launched, Lufthansa started with a 3-node cluster with less than 10 terabytes of data. Today, fast forward 3 years, Lufthansa has scaled from 3 nodes to 48 nodes and are managing 1.2 petabytes of billing and reservation data on vSAN. And this is a classic example of a customer that started small, did not have to make a huge CapEx investment upfront, started small, did a proof of concept, loved the solution, started scaling it 1 node at a time, 1 disk at a time, and then went all the way up to 48 nodes, and it's still counting. Now they're thinking of deploying many more reservation apps, billing and reservation related mission critical apps on vSAN.
Perfect. Great. That I think puts the final nail in the coffin on this myth. Thank you very much for joining us today and talking about and helping us really knock out this myth that vSAN does not scale. And to everyone out there, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And until the next time, thank you again.